Hi, how are you? Hi, people. Just waiting for Brown Women Health to join us. So I'm playing some music. Good. I'm just listening to Money by Lisa. How many of you have heard this song? Uh. Just waiting for Brown Women Health. Way I feel. Some money. Some money. Oh, snap. All right, guys, I'm going to come. Oh, Brown Women Health is here. Hey. How do I request? Oh. Oh. Hi.
Hey,
How are
hi.
you?
I'm good. How are you?
I just saw your message. I'm so sorry.
No. I ran a little bit late, but
No
thank you
worries.
for
No.
inviting me.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good, good. So just a quick introduction. Introduce yourself to everyone.
Sure. All right. Hi, my name is Ameek. I am the founder of the page Brown Woman Health, and that page is really dedicated towards South Asian women and the health disparities that exist within that subgroup. And so feel free to follow, check out the page, and learn about the different disparities that exist specifically to our culture, as well as culturally accurate or culturally effective ways to help with some of these like illnesses or different health problems that exist.
Yes, thank you. So we have done a couple of lives before about COVID-19, about, Garam Girl Summer. Like
Yeah.
we've done several lives, and I always love having you here, talking about, women's health. It's so important, especially in different types of communities. We deal with different disparities and different cultural aspects. Um, so as you may or may not know, I hosted a pink party for raising money for Planned Parenthood. And I was able to raise some money throughout the entire month of October. So this is kind of like our final, like, women's health event that we're trying to, help empower women, help empower people to seek more insight into their bodies, because I feel like a lot of people tend to almost put their health on the back burner, and as we've seen in these past couple of years, that's not something we can afford to do anymore, and now we have to really get ourselves checked out. And obviously there's apprehension in different types of groups and different, religious aspects, this and that, but it's now more than ever so important to have voices like yours on platforms speaking about how we can help our communities be better educated about their bodies and just take control of their narrative and not feel scared to take control. So I really appreciate you coming on here, and I really appreciate that you're taking the time to speak with us today, especially on our little final farewell to the pink wave till next year. So it's so great to have you on.
No, thank you. Actually, the first live that we ever did through the page was with your pink party last year. So this is always like super special as well. I think it's amazing that even as an artist, like you're taking out the time to like, fundraise for causes like Planned Parenthood, and talk about a lot of different things, not just, singing, but you talk about like health and all these like political issues as well. And I really appreciate that about you and like the, yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I don't know. I feel like I have a special connection to health specifically, just simply because the people around me are all doctors, um, and I know that doesn't make me a doctor. That doesn't make me anything. But the point is I feel I felt very empowered with my health journey. So I feel like, why not inspire others to be empowered and take ownership whenever they're in the doctor's office, and like be, cognizant of that, because, people of color tend to um, kind of get, excuse my French, the shit end of the stick. A lot of the time our problems aren't viewed as important enough or diagnosed enough.
Yeah.
So this leads me to my first question, which is, what are the biggest misconceptions that brown women have around their health specifically?
Yeah, there's so many, but like just because we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
Parenthood a little while ago, I
Mm-hmm.
think one interesting stat is that South Asian women are less likely to get pap smears. And like the reason for that is because like a lot of us have this misconception that like things like pap smears are tied to like virginity or like other taboo topics. So
No way.
that's crazy to me. Like statistically, because of that, too, South Asian women are they get diagnosed later statistically for things like cervical cancer because no one wants to get these exams done. They don't get them as frequently. So that's a huge one. A huge,
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
I would have never known that had you not told me, but it actually very much makes sense in the context of our culture.
right, right.
Wow. So pap smears.
Yeah, yeah.
God, what are we doing?
Yeah, so that's like a huge one because like, we're talking about Planned Parenthood and like all of that, like even with like reproductive health, with cervical cancer, even breast cancer, like South Asian women are get diagnosed like a lot later on average than other cultures, just because
Wow.
women in general, it could be that, but also like South Asian women tend to not get the necessary tests that they need done because they don't necessarily put themselves first when it comes to a family situation. So there are research studies on that too. So there's a lot. And I think we just really need to be more proactive with our health and put ourselves at a higher priority than we do.
100%. I completely agree. That's so interesting to me, that is one of the things that is actually plaguing us, is that we're holding ourselves back. Like
Yeah,
we tend to get the stereotype that we are the doctors, the engineers, right? And
yeah,
now to see us actually turn away from doctors
yeah,
because we're so hung up about our cultural whatever hangups there are, whatever blockages there are. It's like everyone tells you, become a doctor, become this, become that, but nobody tells you, like, hey, you should probably go to the doctor
yeah, yeah.
yourself. It's not just becoming one, it's also taking care
Of yourself.
of
Yeah,
the body,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
especially South
Yeah,
Asian.
yeah, I think we put like you said, we put so much emphasis on doing well, like professionally and all of that, but like along with that, with all the stress that you put on yourself, and like you tend to ignore all these physiological things that are happening. You ignore all these symptoms. So it's so important to not do that. And I think I'm also a culprit of it. Like I know I'm not the
Yeah,
most.
everyone's a culprit.
Yeah.
You tend to forget about. I think people in general are a culprit, but there's a lot of, I think with women especially, we feel like we have so much to prove constantly, that
Yeah.
we're not weak or we're not this, or and going to the doctor is considered almost like a weakness,
Right.
in
Yeah.
terms of like, I can handle the pain. Because we go through, menstruation, and that's so painful for some people. So if they can go through that pain,
Yeah.
why can't they go through any other pain in the day to day?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And like you're talking about menstruation, I think another misconception, or like, it's not misconception, but periods are so tabooed. Like no one wants to talk about them, right? Or like there's no like good words in like Hindi or something that talks about periods. So that's another thing. Like,
I know I saw a sign in India, literally, I think like a year ago when I went.
yeah,
It was like, if you are on your menses period, like it was the weirdest, most awkward way of wording. Like, if you are on your period, don't go into the temple. Like,
yeah.
very, you know,
Oh,
but
oh,
yeah. And they said it so weird. They said it in like five different ways. It was like, very awkward to read. And I was just like, why couldn't you just say, like, if you're on your period, like, just don't go, like, it's just
Yeah.
go to the temple or something like that.
Right.
Like, just don't do it. Like, it was so, they were like, menstruation, menses, period, this, blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh my God, why are you naming like every single,
Right. Every synonym. Yeah.
and every synonym, but like just being like, if you're menstruating, don't go. Like, that's
Yeah.
like very simple and blatant. Like, we can
Right.
definitely have a conversation about that. But like,
Yeah.
it's so like
Right.
everyone's so awkward about it.
Right. No, and like I was just reading this. Like I think it's like 70% of Indian like girls don't know about periods until they get their first one. So I'm sure like when you get the first one, you're like, God, what's happening? I'm
Shocked.
bleeding. Like, you know, like that's crazy to think about too.
And those poor girls, I can just imagine like the first time is just like like
Yeah.
what just happened? Because like we all associate blood with like horrible things. So it's like, oh my God, like
Right.
I can just imagine that conversation is just too awkward.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
Uh,
Which leads me to my next question, which is how can we change the conversation about women's health in the brown community? We're
right.
having a conversation right now about it, but like how can people actively in our lives do that and within their own households? Because so much of the stigma is really conversations that you're having on your in your living room, or conversations that are not technically being had, but they're just actions
Yeah.
being.
Yeah, yeah. I think the first thing is just talk openly about your period. Like in front of, I know like when I was growing up, like I'd feel like I'd be okay with my mom, but I didn't want to talk about periods with my dad. Like I think, you know, asking him like if I need a pad, like ask him like, can you go to the store and get it? And I did that and he came back with tampons instead and I was not very happy. But I think that you just talking about it, it's awkward at first, but the more you talk about it, like I complain to my brother about cramps all the time. Like I think that's how you normalize conversations. So these periods don't have to be gross. Like you
Yeah.
can if you talk about it in a way that makes it normal, because it's so normal to menstruate, it doesn't have to be gross. Like I don't think like if I got a paper cut and I was bleeding, is that gross? Like it's normal.
Yeah.
Get paper cuts, things like that. And periods aren't even like a bad thing. Like paper cuts hurt and all, but like
Yeah.
periods are there for a reason. Like it's part of our process. It's
Mhm.
I think so that's a huge thing in general with women's health. Like being more open about like going to the doctor, being more
Mm.
open about things. Even cancer is so stigmatized because
Mhm.
a lot of like Indian cultures believe that like if you have something like cancer, you know, like karma is a huge thing. Like you did something bad, that's why you,
Wow.
and that shouldn't be okay, right? Like so if we talk more about these things, like for example, in my community, I noticed people who had breast cancer, for example, wouldn't talk openly about it. Like it was kind of hidden, which makes sense. It's like a personal thing, but like after a while, once you start telling people, it doesn't have to be as bad. I mean, that's a horrible like condition to be diagnosed with, but like you
Yes.
shouldn't feel like you deserve this sort of thing. You know, you shouldn't feel like you are like a bad person, you did something wrong.
Mhm.
Like I think if you talk openly, it's so easy to say talk openly, but that's truly what it
Yeah.
is. Talk more to like anyone. Don't filter yourself, don't feel bad about anything, because like, you know, a lot of the times all of this is out of our control, but like you can, by talking, you can be helping other people, and sometimes you're even helping
Yeah.
yourself by just talking.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's just, I guess what you're saying is like having like even just like your platform, like you're able to have these hard conversations in actual fun and productive ways, like
Yeah.
with the posts that you do, and all of the stuff that you put out there. It's all actual great information, post in a fun way that people can actually digest and like and really understand, oh, why is this wrong that we're not talking about it? Why are we not, more receptive to talking about things that aren't really supposed to be things in our culture? They have no cultural significance. Like you said with the cancer example, what does that have to do with your karma? It just is like something happened, like there shouldn't be like a feeling bad of that situation. I know in certain cases um we've had people like commenting on people's health when they're not doctors. Like everyone suddenly becomes a doctor when something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people just like commenting very insensitive things towards people, not realizing like there's a human behind the space. And like, for instance, like the example, there was a person that we knew that had like a heart issue, and they were like, oh, you should probably do this. And he's like, well, no shit, Sherlock. Like, why are you telling me this? Like, ask me if I'm okay.
Yeah.
Ask me if I'm all right. Like, don't just give me advice. And the thing is we're so trained not to talk about things that when we are confronted with it right in our face, we say the most awkward things.
Yeah. Very
Right?
true.
Like, we
Yeah.
don't know how to actually have a good conversation, be like, oh, how are you doing? Because
Right.
we were taught not to talk about it, or we were taught like default give advice when you don't know what to say.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that's like a huge thing. Like sometimes we don't even know how to approach a topic, and like you said, it's just like, hey, how are you? And that really, does it. Like if someone doesn't want to open up, like it's fine. Let's give them that space.
Mm-hmm.
But you've made that step, so now they can open up to you. And just being
Mm-hmm.
there is so important too. So
Yeah,
that's a huge one.
yeah, for sure. So I think basically to sum up what we're saying is that we should just be open to having more conversations without feeling stigma. Like we shouldn't feel anything if someone else reacts to it in a bad way. We should just keep going on forward and having these conversations as if their reaction is their reaction. Our confidence in our own conversation doesn't, shouldn't be hindered by someone else's crazy reaction to what we're saying, because
Yeah.
that's the only way we can invoke change, right? Like, is by actually not worrying so much about the stigmas and just worrying about, hey, we're having this conversation and this is how we're going to do it. If you would like to have it in a different way, we're more than open to, but we still need to have the conversation regardless.
Right, exactly. And I think another thing is like some people don't want to open up because it's like, oh, they're gonna start talking about me, and that's valid too. Like there's a huge gossip culture that we live in.
Yeah.
And I think like no, don't gossip. Health is not a gossip topic. Like,
Yep.
health. And like so many people are going through so many different things, and we see this through COVID too. So that's another thing to add. But you summed it up really well.
Oh, thanks. So we are talking about tough conversations. So I actually have a song. It's called Cry. It's about mental health. It's about taking care of your mental health and feeling okay to cry. I wrote the song because I was with my dad. I was living with my dad, and unfortunately, he got COVID in the beginning of COVID-19. He didn't even know because they wouldn't test him. That's how early he got it, when nobody like knew what COVID was.
Yeah.
And it was really, really frustrating because we just had to be apart. And all I remember thinking is like, what is there to do? The world has stopped. I can't even, eat dinner with my father. I can't even be near him.
Yeah.
I can't even be near my friends. I can't be near my other family.
No one. Yeah.
No one. And I just felt so, isolated and just freaked out, to be quite frank. And so I was just like, there's literally nothing left to do but cry. Like, I'm like going through the to-do list on things to make me happy, but I can't go to the gym. I can only work out at home. I've literally been staring at the same like 5-6 walls every day. I don't want to go to the grocery store because it's dangerous. At the time, everything was dangerous.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So like, you don't want to go outside. You don't want to do this. You don't want to do that. It's like a whole new age, a new era. So I wrote that song just being like, there's literally nothing left to do but just cry, because I can't do any of the things that would normally make me happy. And as you know, in the brown community specifically, we have a big issue with talking about mental health. And I wanted you to a little bit like elaborate on the fact that South Asian women have the most underused mental health services. Why do you think that is? And what can we do to help combat that type of issue? And like a physical issue.
Yeah. Well, just a quick shout out. Thank you to my friend in the comments.
Hi.
um, but yeah, just to kind of go act like the song's named Cry, right? And I think that's such a good thing to say because like a lot of the times we bottle up our emotions and crying helps us. It releases like endorphins, I believe, and like, you know, makes you feel a little bit better. So and I'm so sorry to hear about like what you went through at the beginning of COVID, especially. I'm sure like that was the time where we are all just confused about COVID, you know?
I mean, I'm over it now, but like at the time I was like, holy shit,
Yeah.
what is going on?
I can't even imagine that. But
My dad's okay though. Everyone's good.
glad. Yeah. But yeah, just to answer your question, I think so. Yeah, South Asian women underutilize mental health resources, like that's been like in like research papers. But I think the main reason for that is just stigma. Because we don't talk about like mental health enough. Like when we look at mental health, we kind of dismiss it. Like at least in our culture, that's what we see. Like people dismissing it very easily. Like oh, or like there's something wrong in this person's head, but like it's not like a nice sensitive way of treating mental health, right? Like this just making them sound like they're a crazy person. So I think it goes back to like one, talk more openly about mental health, but also when we're talking about something like therapy, like talk about it as a positive way. Kind of it's medicine, right? So like just like normal medicine, therapy is a good thing, like things like that. Like no one should be kind of ostracized for any sort of mental illness, and it's I wish I could give like a main reason for why that's the case, but I think it goes back to like in general, like South Asian women like are not prioritizing their own health. Like we see that culturally, and that also falls with mental health. Like a lot of the times like women will say like, you know, you're not really understanding where I'm coming from, but there are people there who do understand, like, and if you talk more about it, like hopefully you'll find those pages, those resources. And I think another thing though is not only like people are scared or there's that stigma, but also their linguistic barriers. Like if you're in the US, right, and you newly immigrated, you might not be able to have the best conversation with the therapist because you know your first language might not be English and they only speak English. So there's definitely like you're not able to completely translate what's going on in your head, right? So that linguistic barrier is huge. And I think the best solve for that is using websites like southasiantherapist.org, finding a therapist who might speak your language. So then you don't have to keep translating everything that's going in your mind.
Type this in the chat.
Yeah.
South.
Yeah. Just, you know, find someone who might understand you in a cultural way, is culturally sensitive. So you don't need to really explain all of that, like mother-in-law, daughter-in-law drama, whatever, you're like super, you know, South Asian thing that's there, but like at the same time,
so southasiantherapist.org.
yeah.
Okay, perfect. I put it in the chat for people to go check it out because I think it's important for people to realize. Sorry, continue.
No, yeah, thank you for putting that in the chat. So yeah, and there's so many languages in South Asia, so like finding someone who can speak that language, I think that's a huge one. So yeah, I think those are the two main things: stigma and language.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't even think about language either as much because you just assume that everyone can, because you just assume. I don't know why I assume that.
Yeah.
You just do.
Yeah.
You just assume like everyone. And then we also forget that like therapy, I think it's because I've grown up in the United States. So I think it's really wild that I didn't even think about the mental health of people who have immigrated here.
Yeah.
You know, growing up in the United States, of course I can see an American therapist because they understand somewhat of my macro environment. So I can talk to them about my macro environment, maybe less of my micro environment, but my macro can be taken care of a little bit with therapy. Micro, I might need to see a South Asian therapist.
Right.
Because micro, like the pressure of being a daughter or the pressure of being a daughter-in-law or the pressure of, you know, taking care of your parents and, you know, that guilt feeling that we all get when, you know, we haven't seen our parents or talked to our parents for a long time. All of that is like, you know, it weighs heavy on your heart, and not many people can understand that if they don't understand that microenvironment. So southasiantherapist.org, I'm definitely going to check that out because I think it's very important for people to access that resource, especially in the South Asian community. So yeah, I just think like this is what we need to focus on, is our mental health as well, because we always forget.
Yeah.
We always
Yeah.
forget about, you know, here we're always concentrating. I mean, we barely concentrate on here. So
Yeah.
like, what makes me think that this?
Yeah. Yeah.
But do you think like there are other? So this is another like kind of interesting question.
Mhm.
I feel like mental health was built into some of the South Asian religions. It's just we ignore that aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like think about Hinduism, yoga is such a part of Hinduism, and yet, and that's supposed to be for mental health, I believe, you know, like
Yeah.
meditation and all of that stuff is built in to that religion. And same with Islam. Like I can't speak to Buddhism or any other religion. I only, quite frankly, very know Hinduism a little bit, and then also Islam.
Yeah.
But obviously more Islam. I'm Muslim. But the fact that, you know, praying 5 times a day, and that's a form of meditation.
Yeah.
Um, if anything, that's where you're supposed to take that 10-second break, where people tell you, oh, if you're feeling overwhelmed, you should take 10 seconds to yourself and breathe. Yoga is that, and so is namaz. So like I find it so interesting that we would be the people who ignore
Yeah. No,
built in.
that's true. I follow the Sikh religion.
Oh
Sikh
yeah.
faith. Yeah, and so now that you say that, right? Like whenever I go through something like so stressful, like the first thing I'll do is like religion, pray, like attend some class, like religious studies, or like yeah, I turn to religion, and I think that's such a good point to have because you're right. Like even though we don't talk about mental health so openly, and that might be more of a cultural thing, but
Mm-hmm.
all these South Asian religions, they kind of know, like, you know, meditation, that's, sorry, I was just looking at the comments.
Yeah.
Meditation is really, like, important. And then, like, in general, like, they teach us, like, you know, in Sikhism, like, you know, you, like, how to be happy in life. And that's, like, a whole
Yeah.
episode. And I think that's mental health, you know, like, happiness. Yeah, and I was just looking at the comments, but, like, even, like protesting, like raising your voice for Indian farmers. That's a huge thing that's happening in India.
Yeah.
And I mean, to tie that to mental health in some way.
It is mental health. It
Yeah.
is health.
Yeah, just raising your voice, because I think a lot of my stress during the pandemic actually came from the farmers' protests, because that's something I'm really passionate about, and like just seeing, and even now seeing like the things that are happening and how that's not really gone anywhere. Not to turn this into a whole other conversation, but
no, but
yeah, I think
reason why, part of the reason why that protest is in existence is because of mental health. People were tired.
Yeah. Yeah. The suicide rates for
Right.
farmers in India are high. Yeah.
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 Absolutely and crazy.
Yeah. So we did answer that in the comments.
Yeah.
But
we have I have talked about the farmers protest, but I will probably revisit that topic again, just to see where it's at now, because it's still going on. It's not that
it's been over a year and it's still going on. So yeah.
One of the largest protests in human history.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, exactly. So that's a huge thing. And I think, you know, how you're using your platform as an outlet to talk about like different social issues as well, and like singing, I think that really helps mental health, doing what you love and tying in, and like, you know, talking openly, not oppressing what you feel, which kind of also answers the question of taking up more space and all of that. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, it's so true. Like, I think what a lot of the issue with our mental health, specifically in the South Asian community, is, and I think a lot of communities can relate to this. It's not just South Asian. We're just speaking to this because we are South Asian, but like so much, and I'm sure like other religions also I feel like every religion has some sort of mental health thing put in there.
Yeah.
Purpose, but like none of us utilize it as well, like as we should. Like we don't utilize it as a mental health thing. We're just like, we have to pray because we have to. Like it's like a chore, and it's not supposed to be a chore. It's supposed to be a break. um,
Yeah.
for your brain.
It's so
And
good. Yeah.
and because we're so taught that this is like a chore, that we forget that the whole purpose is just so that you can take a break.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
5 seconds and comment and like just think about something else for like 5 minutes. Like it's fine.
Yeah, 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 exactly. And like, yeah, so I think there's so many things like yoga and like just meditating and like that we need to tap into more. And yeah, reframing religion from a chore to like what you said.
Yeah,
That's true.
like
I really love what you just said. Yeah.
but even just like suppressing, I think we just suppress so much because we all get afraid to speak up about like random things.
Yeah.
I've noticed this even in like just social justice issues. I've seen a lack of South Asian voices.
Yeah.
Um, and it's nothing to do with their fault. It's literally how we're taught. Like we're not taught to speak up
Yeah.
on things that upset us. We're taught to repress those feelings. Like even if you were upset with your parents, for instance, like I was always taught to have an open conversation because I was lucky to have parents that were willing to have one.
Yeah.
But there are people who don't even have open conversations with their parents, and
Exactly.
it's so difficult. So obviously that gets held up in your noggin, and it's going to be those feelings are there. So we tend to not talk about things that we care about
Yeah.
because we weren't allowed to. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a lot of undoing culturally what we were taught as kids. Um,
Yeah. Um, yeah.
and then, uh, so the next question is, why do you think women's health is such a taboo to talk about in the South Asian community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think this really just kind of you know how you just said like it's so hard for South Asians to voice their opinions. I think South Asian women is a whole other boat. As South Asian women, we're not taught to take the space that we should be taking. Um,
Mm.
that and also, and this also ties into mental health, but like we people from India or South Asia really come from a collectivist culture where like you're like really like whatever you do is for the good of the whole group or the whole community. Versus in the States, it's more like when you immigrate in the Western culture, like it's more individualistic. So like people really care more about themselves. And that causes like this sort of culture shock. But
Mm.
so like as women in general though, like we're not like taught to take up enough space, but also we're taught to prioritize our families before ourselves. And I
Mm.
think from like an older woman standpoint, for example, like some like a mom or something, like let me first focus on like the kids before I go get my pap smear, you know? And I think
Yeah.
a huge thing. And because of that, it's turned into a taboo because it's like, who cares about like women now? Like, you know, that's not a priority. Like why even talk about it? I mean, I'm no expert on this, but this is what I think I really gauged.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't need to even be experts to realize that there is a problem. I mean, we're not going to mental health institutions.
Yeah.
We're not going to the doctor's office as much as we should. We're not seeking medical attention like we should. We tell our kids, you know, be doctors and do this and do that, and yet we won't see one. It's
Yeah.
quite astonishing.
Yeah.
You know, we pay our way through and then just don't see a doctor, or we're hesitant to do so. And it's it is more empowering when you do it.
Yeah.
And I, what people don't realize is there is an empowerment factor in it. Taking control of your health and knowing exactly where you're at is incredibly empowering. It's not supposed to be scary. And I think people also fear that I go to the doctor's office, I'm going to find out bad news, or
Yeah. Yeah.
is going to happen. And it's like, if you go to the doctor's office often enough, more likely you're going to have less bad news.
Right.
And if you do have bad news, you're able to catch it early because you go yearly. And
Yeah.
that's the way it's supposed to be. And I think people forget that aspect of it. I mean, I had a friend of mine, she was telling me about how she went for a pap smear for the first time when she was like in her early 20s or something. And I was like, wait, not early 20s, but like later 20s, mid 20s. And I was like, wait, you didn't go when you were like 21? Like that's when you were supposed to go. And she's like, no, I didn't want to go. And then I went on a YouTube channel where a woman said that she got her first pap smear and found out that she had PCO, like something crazy with her cervix.
Yeah.
Um, not really sure what it was, but
Mhm.
she was like, I went on someone's YouTube and I saw this video, and the first pap smear this girl got, she figured out that something was wrong with her.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
like, that made me want to go right away, because I was like, I need to figure out if something's wrong with me.
That's
And
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
you have this feeling if you had gone every year,
Yeah.
um, which sucks, but at the same time, I'm glad you're going. It
Right.
should take you to feel scared about having something for you to go and take control of your health.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. That's really important, and that's reminding me like I have to also make my appointments. But like at the
Same.
same time, but at the same time,
Shot, gotta get all of that stuff done.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But that's awesome, and I think it like in general, like social media plays such a huge role when it comes to like health related things. Even with getting the COVID vaccine, so many like celebrities were endorsing it. Um, Past smears, that's awesome. Someone's talking about that. I think that's what we really need, like more women to talk about women's health. That's it's glad I'm glad to hear that like that's already like facilitating like conversation. People are like influenced by it, and I think there's always room for more. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there are certain influencers, like I follow Avanti Nagral. I hope I
Uh-huh.
said. She talks about periods, and she talks about sex, and she talks about all of this very openly. And
Mm-hmm.
she's from India, but she went to school in the United States. So
Okay.
it's really empowering to hear her speak,
Yeah.
because here's a young woman who is taking control of the narrative and does not give an F about what these conservative people think.
Yeah.
She is saying that it's important for her followers to feel safe in her space.
Yeah.
And I think we need more influencers like that, and we should encourage more influencers like that, and have maybe campaigns set up with South Asian influencers, and try to say like, hey guys, like, let's do something together. This is the month we're going to do it, and just like go to town and make sure that we create awareness, because this is so important. We need to take back the narrative that this is all gross stuff. It's not. It's our bodies. This is what naturally we need to do.
Yeah.
Take care of ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think it'd be really cool to have a campaign like that. I like now that you mentioned that, I'm like that would
Yeah,
be
we should
yeah.
get people on board. That would be so fun.
Yeah.
Also, so this again leads me to my next point. What do you hope to achieve with your platform, and how can people support brown women health?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the first thing was why we made it was to just raise awareness about all of these different things. Like mental health issues are common. You're not alone. Like pap smears are so scary, but you're not alone. Like all of
Yeah.
us feel that too. You know, PCOS is a huge one, and like
Yeah.
also another thing. Like we've been reading, like oh, South Asian women maybe they might have more risk of getting PCOS. You see this like kind of like a maybe in all these research things because there's no like South Asian woman like or maybe there is now, doing
Yeah.
research on PCOS. So another part of the page is not to just talk about the issues, but empower people to like think about them and hopefully like start doing research on these things, finding out like is there a tie or is there not? Like the maybe language is not what we want, but like we want a
Mm.
definitive there. There's that, as well as to in general just empower women who are in health, not just doctors, but like there's so many different health professions out there. So
Yeah.
highlighting different South Asian women doing the work that they're doing, like advocating for certain things, helping others in some certain way. And I think just being like I like seeing that as someone like working towards a certain profession, like seeing all these like brown women doing all of these things is so empowering for me. And then talking about certain like medical issues is so empowering for me. So it's kind of selfish in that sense, but I know for a fact that it's also not just empowering for me, but for other brown girls out there. So that's basically like what we want to achieve with their platform. And how you can help is by like following the page and sharing everything. I think all
Yeah.
of the resources are like beautiful bright colors and like really nice graphics just to make the conversations more like things that people want to like check out, and like you're reading more about these things now, like go get that pap smear, like it's not a bad thing, it's a
More
really
fun
important.
too, because I think people love gravitate towards, cool
Yeah.
color, cool graphics, and things that will make them feel, a little more comfortable with all of this stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And like we live in this day and age of like WhatsApp forwards and all this fake
Yeah.
news, and like we really make sure that like whatever we're putting out there is like really accurate, you know? It's not
Mhm.
another WhatsApp forward, but you can still, you know, forward these instead of like the fake news that you're circulating. I think
Yeah.
that's a huge thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because we definitely have a lot of WhatsApp university doctors out there
Yeah. Yeah.
spreading
So
some
funny.
gnarly information.
Especially during COVID. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially during COVID.
Yeah. So,
Oh, girl,
yeah,
the amount of WhatsApp news that I saw, I was like, oh gosh, this is a
right. Yeah, I think that's kind of what inspired it too. Like when we were making the page, it's just like, you know, I'm not bad at making graphics. And hey, like there's so much fake news out there. Let's make something more, you know, accurate. Like all the information's verified. Even the podcast that we have, which is available on like Spotify or Apple or like anywhere, honestly, that has a lot of really good content with like, you know, amazing speakers. And you're on our podcast too with our girl.
I'm on a podcast, Girl Summer.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, thank you for being on that as well. And like, yeah, that was such a good conversation as well. It's always nice talking. I think
Yeah,
the lives
always
are great.
talking to you. I love bringing you on for this reason because I want people to understand, like, even though it's brown women's health and it's focused on South Asian
Mm-hmm.
women's particularly, it doesn't mean it doesn't apply to your culture. It doesn't apply to everybody. That I
Yeah,
know so many different cultures that are very similar to ours that don't address health issues, and there are not many resources out there for them. So
yeah,
if you want to check out brown women health and you're not necessarily South Asian, it doesn't matter. Everyone's welcome there
mm-hmm.
to check out those resources and be able to, have conversations. I mean, you can have conversations with South Asian women and be like, how are our similar health issues the same in our culture?
Mm-hmm.
Almost have like almost an exchange of dialogue on how we can improve women's health everywhere, in general. I mean, like, we're not limited. I feel like women's health is obviously underserved, but I think
Yeah,
women of color
even
deal
more.
with a lot of the back end kind of bullshit that
Yeah,
we get unsure. We are told hysterical. You're
yeah,
diagnosed yourself wrong. You're doing this wrong. I mean, sometimes it takes me to go into my doctor's office, like a new doctor, and I literally will have to say, my dad's doctor, in order for them to take me seriously. It's happened.
wow, wow,
Yeah. There was a guy, I had like alopecia where a chunk of my hair fell out and I was like freaking out. And I went to a dermatologist and he was so rude to me. He said, your hair could never grow back. The horrible bedside manner, like literally saying your hair could never grow back. It could grow back white. All your hair could fall off. Like this could be a trend for the rest of your life. And I,
that's sad.
was sitting there 20 years old being like,
Yeah,
just ready to cry.
yeah.
What's your major? I was like, music industry. And he was like, oh, so what does your dad do? I don't know why he said that. I think it was because he knew I was brown. And I said, my dad is a doctor. And he goes, immediate bedside manner completely changed.
Horrible doctor.
Completely was so nice to me after that. And I was like, that's what it took for
Yeah,
you to respect me. So,
that's so
which is
unfortunate.
so annoying. But I mean, like, I think people need to learn how to advocate for their health, and they're too scared to because they're like, I don't know anything. It's like, you know yourself, you know your body. If you're in
Yeah.
camp,
Yeah, don't be
check
afraid to
out.
ask the questions that you have to medical professionals. I know it could be daunting. It's like, oh, but like, you know, that's what they're there for, to answer them too. Like, you know,
Mhm.
no matter what they make you feel like, yeah, that sucks. Like to even hear that story.
It,
Yeah.
it sucks to be told something and feel looked down upon by a doctor, but to be honest, nothing is more important than your health. That person you feel that way in that moment, who cares?
Yeah.
They're not in that body. They don't understand. If they don't understand, go to a different doctor. Just be like,
Exactly.
what? I'm having a nice day. If you want to be rude to me, that's fine. I'm leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Advocate for yourself and feel empowered in that advocacy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, no, I think that's another part of like the page as well, you know, just like empowering women in general, and we can never have enough empowerment. Like that's in general with like women
Mm-hmm.
feminism. I think that's a huge
Yeah.
thing. But yeah. Well,
100%.
Yeah, thank you for having me on
Yeah,
your
thank
live.
you so much for coming. Everyone, please go follow Brown Women Health. I've put their page in the comments.
Thank you.
And please go follow Brown Women Health. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for spending the time. And thank you for being part of the pink wave of October. We're
Woo!
we're not celebrating. We're honoring Breast Cancer Awareness Month,
Awesome.
and Pregnancy Loss Awareness Month, and International Day of the Girl. So um, we made this October pink, and thank you for spreading pink with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me and doing what you're doing. And yeah, I hope to see you around.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great night. Thank you guys so much for coming. Bye.
Yeah.